All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I will call into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for June 18th, beginning at 7:07 p.m. I want to thank everybody for coming out and being here with us this evening. We will start our meeting with the open ceremony. Please join Mr. David Wilbanks in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please silence all cell phones and electronic devices to avoid disruption to those around you. And now, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. Okay, our first item on our agenda this evening is a presentation of our SLAB students. Ms. Foster, please.
Thank you, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. Tonight, we get a sneak peek at our future, and I am happy to report that our future is very bright. Tonight, we're going to introduce you to 8 students who serve on the Student Leadership Advisory Board. Of these 8 students, 7 are presidents of their junior high class, 11th grade class. And one of our students is a senior who served on this council last year. Now, what they're going to be doing throughout the year is really getting a bird's eye view of what goes on in school administration, in policy, and in the education realm. They're going to team up in a mentorship, each one paired with one of our board of trustee members. And they're going to visit events and attend meetings and learn about bonds and all kinds of really great things that are going to be very, very exciting. So we're thrilled to have such a quality group of students that are serving as the eyes and ears for students and advising all of us in the administration on areas of interest that students have that we can help to influence and make their education even better. So tonight, I want to introduce you to the students who are a member of this board. When I call your name, please stand and remain standing so we can give you a huge round of applause at the end. We're going to start with Arlington Collegiate High School with Alejandro Garcia. From Arlington High School, Izzy Perez. Bowie High School is Genevieve Copeland. Lamar High School, Sophia Ma, who couldn't be with us tonight. Martin High School, Brandon Parker. From Sam Houston High School, Leslie Rocha. And from Seguin High School, Rama Farah. Now, the president that I mentioned, who's the senior, is Mia Palladini, and she is off on vacation, as you know, it was great to do during the summer. But she's with us in spirit. Please join me in saluting these terrific students who are going to have an outstanding year ahead, and our board, who will be mentoring them along the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. We had an opportunity to spend some time with our SLAB students this evening, and we are so very excited about their future. And your future is bright, and let me tell you, we are really excited to spend some additional time with y'all over the next year so y'all can see what we get to do, and so we get to see how y'all actually perform and work within your school. So that's very exciting. And once again, we want to welcome y'all, and we're very excited about the next year. Okay, next on our agenda is a presentation that says Financial Futures Committee presentation. We're going to move that down in our agenda and do our administration first. So, Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays, and I'd like to recommend that the board ratify the appointment of the individuals discussed in closed session for principal of Ashworth Elementary, principal for Butler Elementary, assistant principal for Gunn Junior High, and assistant principal for Sherrod Elementary.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the administrative appointments as discussed in executive session? Dr. Reich?
I move to approve.
Mr. Hogg?
Second.
So we have a motion by Dr. Reich, a second by Mr. Hogg. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Okay, all present, voting in the affirmative. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays, and these individuals have already started working, and so it's my pleasure to introduce the principal for Ashworth Elementary, Ms. Stacy Maddox. Stacy attended Texas Tech University for Bachelor of Science in Speech and Hearing Sciences, University of Texas at Arlington for Master of Ed in Curriculum and Instruction. Most recently, the assistant principal at West Elementary, has been a first grade teacher at Ditto, an instructional facilitator, RTI facilitator at Rockmore Elementary, a first grade teacher at Ashworth Elementary, and a first grade teacher at Johns Elementary as well. Stacy, congratulations.
Thank you. President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, I want to thank you for entrusting me with this position of principal at Ashworth. It's very special to me because I was on the faculty that opened Ashworth in 1996. So it's a coming back home and full circle moment for me. I have my son with me tonight, and he actually is a product of Ashworth and AISD as well. And my mom's at home watching on TV, so hi, Mom. So I also really want to recognize all of the members of the AISD who have been with me throughout my career. There's so many educators who have helped me learn and grow, and many of them are here tonight to celebrate with me. And I am where I am now as a teacher and a leader because of their grace and their encouragement. And I want to thank Ashworth and the faculty for their warm welcome, and I can't wait to get started on our work together. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce the principal for Butler Elementary, Ms. Jennifer Bohannon. Jennifer attended the University of Texas at Arlington for Bachelor of Arts in History and Education, UT Arlington for Master of Education in Leadership and Policy Studies. Most recently, the assistant principal at Butler Elementary, has been an instructional coach at Farrell Elementary, a 6th, a 5th grade teacher as well at Farrell. Jennifer, congratulations.
Thank you. President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to be the principal of Butler Elementary. I'm humbled by that opportunity and feel very blessed to be named as the principal of Butler. I'd also like to thank Dr. Buell and Dr. Jarko for their support and encouragement. I've been helped by many leaders, my past principals who cultivated in me the belief that I was meant to do this work. I would especially like to thank Mrs. Humbles. In the years spent together as the admin team at Butler, we jumped through some hurdles. We laughed a lot, and we shed a few tears too. But we did all of that together. I'd also like to introduce my family. My number one fan is my husband, Brandon. I have Jack, who is a Shack Patriot. And Owen, who is a Butler Bronco. One more year. And then my oldest, who keeps tab on them, I'm sure, from heaven, Grant. I love you, and I want you to know that I do not do this job alone. I am better because of your grace, your love, and your patience. Also, my very first educators are here, and they are otherwise known as my parents, William and Ann. Dad, you made me feel like I could do anything, and because of that, I believe I can. And Mom, you're the mom and the Mimi everyone wished they had, but I am lucky enough to call mine. I love you. I actually started my career in 1999 as a student teacher in AISD, and outside of having my children, I have called this place home. I have had the joy of watching my students grow up, felt the love and support of my colleagues in life's highs and lows. And I have gained lifelong friendships in this district. The AISD developed me as a teacher, as an instructional coach, as an AP, and I know it will develop me as a principal also. I want to truly thank you for being a district where potential gets real for students and for staff. Butler is a special place, and it's full of extraordinarily special human beings. We embrace high expectations because we require that of ourselves. I am proud to honor the traditions of the past while leading this campus towards the future and all that I know Butler has in store. I want to thank the Butler staff and community and I want you to know that your support of me and the role of principal has meant more to me than you will ever know. And I will do my very best to be the principal that you all believe that I can be. Thank you again.
Next, I'd like to introduce the Assistant Principal for Gunn Junior High, Ms. Lillian Orozco. Lillian attended the University of Texas at Arlington for Bachelor of Arts in History, SMU in Dallas for Master of Arts in Dispute Resolution. Most recently, an assistant principal in Irving ISD, has been a social studies teacher in Grand Prairie ISD, and a social studies instructional leader and teacher in Dallas ISD. Lillian, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you so much. President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos, thank you for the opportunity to serve the students of Gunn Junior High and to make an impact in the AISD. To Mr. Villarreal and the hiring committee at Gunn, I am so very happy that you saw a passion for students, for learning, and for leading in me. I am so thankful to all the principals that have guided me in my journey as an educator and who have invested in me as a leader. I want to thank Dr. Brown, whom I met 2 years ago, and though the result of that conversation didn't go as I planned, she became a coach and a mentor to me. To say I love what I do is truly an understatement, because I know I was born to do the job that I got hired to do here in the district. That love has been easy to express to you because I've had the support of my family. To my mother-in-law, I want to thank her for showing me that serving others and listening is a craft that should be practiced daily. To my mom, I want to thank her for giving me the love for books, for learning, and the love for asking a lot of questions. Layla, Emma, and Gio, my 3 wonderful kids, you are incredible human beings and give to the world more than you receive. I am proud to be your mother. Finally, to my husband, Pablo, thank you for walking next to me, for pushing me when I needed to be pushed, and for asking me to rest when I truly needed to rest. Now, there is no time for rest, about 3 weeks, because I have to get ready for a successful upcoming year at Gunn, and because I have to look forward to all that we can accomplish together. So thank you all.
Next, I'd like to introduce the Assistant Principal for Sherrod Elementary, Ms. Chandler Garcia. Chandler attended Texas Women's University for Bachelor of Science in Interdisciplinary Studies, UT Arlington for Master of Ed in Ed Leadership and Policy Studies. Most recently, an instructional coach in Pflugerville ISD, has been an instructional specialist and a 3rd grade teacher in Midlothian, 4th grade teacher in Clear Creek, and a 4th grade teacher in Texas City ISD as well. Chandler, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, thank you for this opportunity and for giving me the chance to grow and lead here in Arlington. It is so good to be home. I am a graduate of Arlington ISD, and I am so excited to be home in Arlington, where I started my education over 30 years ago. I'm honored to join the shared community and excited to once again be part of and give back to a community and district that gave so much to me as a child growing up. I'm here today because of my father and my son and my husband and my sister and my family who have supported me and held my hand through laughter and tears and frustration and anxiety of not knowing what to do. I'm especially grateful to my husband and his job that has taken us all over Texas and has given me an opportunity to learn how school systems across Texas work. So again, thank you, and I look forward to becoming part of the shared community and working collaboratively with the staff and the community and the students to provide excellence.
Very nice. So as is our custom, we ask that the appointees follow Mr. Kale to the lobby for a receiving line so each of us can meet you and welcome you. I also would like for our slab group to also follow out so that everyone can meet you as well. If you would let the board please go first, we would appreciate that, and then we will take a brief break to participate. It is now 7:24. We will start again at 7:35. Okay, continuing with our agenda, we will move back to presentation B. Mrs. Powell, for our Financial Features Committee presentation.
President Mays, board members, Dr. Cavazos, good evening. The Board of Trustees in the early 90s created a Citizens Budget Review Committee. Over the years, that committee has met annually and has had different charges and different issues to work through, but has always advised this board on financial matters and on budget matters. The current charge to the FFC is to provide findings and recommendations from committee stakeholders to the Board of Trustees relating to budgets and long-range financial planning to support our strategic plan. We changed the charge to this committee a couple of years ago, and rather than focus on just the very upcoming budget year, this committee now focuses on long-range financial planning. And so this group has been meeting, has actually met 7 times since they last reported to the board last February, and we're having a party outside. And so, I know, I guess. So yeah, it's all about Stephen. So they've met 7 times, and they have they've tackled some big issues and processed a lot of technical information. We've actually asked this committee to hold on their report to the board until the legislature finished meeting, until we knew with greater certainty the outcome of school finance legislation. And so we do have that now, and they have completed their work for this year and are ready to present to you. So Stephen Crumby is the chair of the committee, and he is here to report to the board the recommendations from the Financial Futures Committee for this year. So, Stephen.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Thank you, President Mays, Board, Dr. Cavazos. Trying. Thank you. Oh, does it really? Oh, man. It's amazing. Thought you were yanking my leg. All righty. Let's keep it going. All right. Well, thank you very much. There you go. So as Ms. Powell stated, we are here tonight to go over our findings and recommendations as they have to do with budgets and long-range plans and the strategic plan of the district. Budgets being the key part of that, not the current year budget, but multiple budgets and how they have to do with the strategic plan over multiple years. So, it's been quite a year for us, as it has been for most of you. We've seen the work that you've been doing, and we applaud that work. We've been having quite a bit of fun in this committee. So this committee is been made up of quite a diverse group of volunteers, diverse in that it's made up of parents, teachers, administrators, association leaders, former students, and passionate taxpayers of the city of Arlington and the district that have come together and spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how to best make sure that we're investing in the long-term success of this district. So I would like to recognize the efforts of the people that are on this list because they've invested quite a bit of time into this. So we have a couple of people from that committee that are here. I'd also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a couple of other people that aren't on this list. So obviously we have a former chair of this committee that's sitting with you. David Wilbanks chaired this committee for a year and a half, a portion of this current committee year. We're grateful for his input into this committee and the way that he led us, our committee, and we appreciated his partnership. We also appreciate the help of Mrs. Powell and her team within the administration. She and her team gave us the data, the information, the resources that we needed in order to have successful meetings, to come to the with the findings and recommendations that we have tonight, and to really make the FFC a successful venture. So thank you very much, Mrs. Powell and your team. So with that being said, this is the way that we spent the last year and a half. So there's quite a bit on the screen. But we spent one night just about every month looking over a lot of different subjects, a pretty big breadth of information relating to the district's strategic plan, bringing in subject matter experts within the administration, giving us information to help us come to these recommendations. Right, so big topics that helped us create broad views that we can now come here and make recommendations on. Things like the budget, things like operational efficiencies, some things that kind of tie back to what we came with last year, the recommendations that we made last year, and now take a step further to make a little bit more detailed recommendations, but still at a broad enough level to where you, the board, can take that and guide it into something that is more appropriate to make a decision on than our committee. So in addition to this, our committee also worked with the Capital Needs Steering Committee back in March to try and tie the work that we're doing into the work that they're doing. And so I think it's very appropriate for our two committees to make sure that we're tying our financial decisions into the capital needs decisions that they're making. Right, so the recommendations that we made last year in terms of operational efficiencies tied directly into some of the decisions that they're making on capital needs. So we had a good conversation with them to ensure that those decisions are being made in conjunction with each other. So I want to address a theme that we saw kind of web its way into a lot of our conversations throughout this year, and it's probably similar to a theme that you saw work its way into a lot of your conversations, which is school finance legislation. And as Ms. Powell addressed, that's part of why we're here so late in the year, because a lot of our decisions were kind of dependent on what happened with House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 4. With the divergence between the mandates between those two and an outcome with what those mandates were, with how much funding came out of those. You know, a lot of those topics, we weren't sure how they would flesh themselves out until there was some reconciliation between the two and a resolution with one of them. So as we met at the beginning of the year, our committee actually created a subcommittee to pen a letter to Justice Scott Brister, or I apologize, in May of 2018. I said March. But we penned a letter to him to request three things, right? A call to action in three very distinct ways: equitable funding, transparency in taxation, and financial relief for Texas school districts. Right, at the beginning of the Commission on Public School Finance, we thought there was a key amount of time to where we could voice our opinion on matters down in Austin and have our voices heard. And we appreciate the board also voicing their support for us at that time as well. So that was a key way for us to start off and kind of have a united voice as we started our committee year this year. So the topics that we covered after we began this year, I want to start with enrollment trends. So this was one of the topics that we covered on our list earlier. So enrollment trends, we know are kind of a key issue that we've seen over the last 6 or 7 years. So student enrollment has decreased each year since 2013, 2014 at kind of an increasing rate, right? So especially over the last 3 or 4 years, it's increased at about 1.92% on an annual basis. So the district has invested quite a bit recently, right? So personnel, process changes, and investments are actually expected to cut enrollment losses by roughly 60% next year. That's a big win for the district, right? So what are we actually doing? We're marketing. There's a new executive director that's been hired, and we're giving support to declining campuses. So our committee thinks that that's a really big win for us, and we're starting to see the outcomes of that this coming year. So we're excited to see what happens in future years as well, right? I think that we'll see that start to grow more as time goes on. We're also looking at transfers, right? So moving the fall transfer window up rather than just doing spring transfers. And then the personal interactions that we're seeing the district have with families, I think is a really big win. And then the programs that the district is starting. So the language, the leadership, the STEM academies, the early college and career prep, and the other programs that we're starting up. I think these are things that our district is doing really well to make sure that we're competing with districts around us and that we're retaining students that we have, as well as recruiting students from outside. Right, so this is the kind of thought that our committee was really excited to see. And I think these are things that our community is also really excited to see. So these are things that we'd like to see our district and our board do more of. So So in kind of turning that into the Financial Futures Committee and what we're looking at, knowing that enrollment is one of the largest drivers of district revenue, we think growth is really key to a healthy financial outlook. So that's really one of the challenges that we see, which is whenever you look at this chart and you see that total enrollment is going down, year over year revenue is going down, until this most recent year when we see that blip back up, that's been a really good thing for us as a committee to see. And our real challenge here, our question to you, and our question to ourselves and to the administration has been, how do we recruit and retain students in AISD to turn enrollment trends in a positive direction? So we did see a positive blip here, and we want to make sure that this isn't just a blip or an anomaly. We want to make sure that it does become a trend, but we also want to make sure that it becomes a trend that's actually year over year positive, right? So we went from negative 1.9 to about negative 0.8 year over year. So it's still a nominally negative number, but we want to try and figure out how we can get that positive. So that's our challenge with enrollment. We think there are a lot of good things that are going on, and we're hoping that bringing this executive director of marketing, that we can continue to get new ideas and grow on the successes that we've seen. So that's our hope. The next topic that we saw is pre-kindergarten. So whenever we discuss pre-kindergarten, AISD has been innovative in its rollout of pre-K across the district with good participation at schools and partner campuses. So we were all really proud of the way that AISD has accomplished the pre-K program, knowing that there are some challenges with certain schools and facilities and participation, but being able to look at this specific visual here and see how many students we have and how many students we have at different types of programs and campuses was a really positive thing for us to see. Most involvement does come through the traditional half-day campus, though, the campus model that's state funded. Other programs make up 15% of total enrollment. So we can see that there is some desire and a demand for pre-K at our campuses. So whenever we look at that, I think there are a couple of things that took us a little bit by surprise with pre-K. So one of those being kind of the long-term effects that we saw with pre-K. And those long-term effects that we saw were the social and emotional development that come with it. So just the way that students who attend full-day pre-K kind of outpace or outperform their peers throughout their academic development and their academic careers, that really kind of hit a nerve with our committee. And I think that the research is there to prove that. There are multiple studies and sources that we saw that prove that that's true. The reduction in retention in special education kind of hit us as a compelling reason for us to continue to look into this as something that we should be investing in. The increased graduation rate. So tying back to our strategic plan, this seems like a place where we should be looking at and investing. So there are challenges that we're facing, though, right? So whenever we look back at this graphic and see the places where kids are going, but that big bubble where people are primarily looking at our campuses, we do have challenges. So our real question is, should AISD consider implementing a full-day pre-K program? And as we kind of talked through that, we thought about how would you actually go out and do that? What walls do you hit? What barriers to entry are there to do that? So we looked at that and we said, well, there are facilities. So we know that currently we have facility issues. There just aren't schools or classrooms to put some of those kids in. There's curriculum, so we currently don't have curriculum to do a full day pre-K. There's no before and after school care for some of these kids. There's not transportation, so we don't have buses. We don't have an ability to get them there and back home. There's breakfast and lunch service that we would have to do. And then there's no funding at the current time, at least whenever we started having this discussion. I know that state legislation has started to change some of that, so we would have to go back and revisit some of that. But those are some of the challenges that we started to scope out. The next topic that we looked at was operational efficiency. So we've been really proud of the district and the way that they've handled the operational efficiencies. So the district has had multiple cost-saving initiatives in place to help reduce budgetary pressure. One of the things that we're really proud of is the campus consolidations when buildings are being underutilized. So that's things like Ferguson and Owsley, Hutchison and Workman, as well as other consolidations that have happened. Right? If we're not using buildings to their full potential, we need to look at different ways of getting kids into buildings where they actually fit. And saving some cost there. The energy contract that was rebid to provide future cost relief is a really good way for us to go and save money without actually doing anything, without moving kids around, without inconveniencing ourselves. And that's just hard work by our administration going out and finding money. And then procurement of multiple vehicle types for differentiated use provides efficiencies not found in a one-size-fits-all fleet. This is something that our committee actually just thought was really resourceful. Rather than having a fleet type that's all one type of car, figuring out how do you actually fit a car to its use. And that's something that we'd like to see more of happen. The last big topic that we talked about was the general operating budget. So some high-level stats. There was a $2.9 million operating deficit projected this year, or there currently was whenever we last met. There's an additional $10.3 million capital spending funded through the budget. So that $13 million deficit is a $25 million improvement versus the original budget. So this kind of goes back to something that our committee just consistently saw, is that our finance group within the district is just doing a really good job of being stewards of our money. And that's something that we wanted to make sure that we spoke to this board, is that we have faith in the leadership of this district and the way that they're managing our money. We wanted to make sure that we spoke that to you because we believe in their vision and we believe in the way that they're managing our money. There's a $202 million fund balance as of June 30th of 2018. So that's 4.7 months of operating expense, which is pretty amazing, right? So our bond rating is incredible, and that's something that we should strive to continue. So that's another goal that our committee would like to continue to set. Not necessarily 4.7 months, but to continue to make sure that we have enough of a cushion in that fund balance to make ourselves feel comfortable and to continue to have that amazing bond rating. And then the last thing that we wanted to mention was that the school finance legislation that was passed is expected to provide valuable short-term budget relief. And I think that this was really important to us, right? That short-term budget relief. Because despite the added revenue that it brings to us on a or I guess not really even year over year, on a legislation versus non-legislation view, the deficit, there's still a budget deficit that's expected in 2019-2020, and the legislation really just delays, not resolves, a previously forecasted growing annual deficit. And that's something that kind of worries us. I guess in my terms, we're kind of kicking the can down the road. So that's not listed as a challenge here, but to me, it's still a little bit of a challenge. It made us feel really good whenever it came out, but there's still something that worries us. But that's something that we can celebrate now and discuss again at a later point. So here is our general operating budget over the course of the last few years. So we feel good again whenever you look at 2018, 2019, budgeted at negative $39 million versus this year budgeted at negative $4 million, right? This is a really good problem for us to have. The one caveat to this is the negative $4 million does not include any salary adjustments. So just to keep that in mind. So what I'd like to do now is to move from our findings, right? So this is kind of the findings portion, and start moving over to the recommendations portion for our committee. So just to recap the 2018 FFC recommendations that we brought last year. So we brought 4 recommendations last year. The first being to invest in the overall elementary experience. I think we did a really good job of moving on that and then starting to move towards a more detailed experience of that, specifically in pre-kindergarten. Number 2 is evaluate cost effectiveness of facilities, programs, personnel, and services. Number 3, continue to provide competitive compensation and invest in leadership development. And 4 is where we talked about a TRE swap, decreasing the INS tax rate while increasing M&O rate by an equal amount. I think whenever we look at this, what our committee would like to do is to reaffirm these recommendations from last year, the first 3 of these, right? We still feel strongly that these first 3 are equally as important this year as they were last year. The 4th, at this point, we don't necessarily feel is as relevant today as it was last year. For this year, for 2019, our first recommendation is this. In order to maintain good stewardship of taxpayer dollars, we recommend the board continue to emphasize additional efficiencies, including but not limited to strategic procurement, campus consolidations, preventative maintenance programs, and community partnerships. Right, so we believe that each one of these ties back into our need to be good stewards of our money, of the taxpayer money, over the long course of our district's finances. So within strategic procurement, I'd like to specifically call out the work that we did to rebid contracts, as well as the way that we procured new vehicles. We thought that these were 2 really good kind of outside of the box ways of going and finding cost savings and making sure that we were being good stewards of our money. Within campus consolidations, I think this also ties into the way that we look at reusing buildings that we have consolidated on before, which we're really proud of. For our second recommendation, given that the benefits of pre-K are incredible for our students, we recommend prioritizing pre-kindergarten and AISD. So we know that there are some recommendations coming to move along with investments in pre-K this year. And we do feel the need to prioritize that this year, right? So anything that we can do to invest, especially any learnings that we can make in the short term that might help us to do that more effectively in the long term, our committee believes we should be doing. We must move forward with preparing for full-day pre-K irrespective of school finance legislation mandates. So we know that those are coming, and we believe that that's something that we should be doing irrespective of what House Bill 3 tells us. Our third recommendation is that we recommend the board assess a TRE moving forward on an as-needed basis. So this is where we differ a little bit from our recommendation last year based on school finance legislation. A TRE is not necessary for the current school year as we thought it might be last year, thanks to the favorable revenue outcomes from the school finance legislation. If deficits continue into the future years, though, a TRE could be required to maintain our fund balance. Again, we trust the board as well as our finance department and the administration here to keep an eye on our fund balance as well as our finances and make that call on an as-needed basis. So that's what I have today on behalf of the Finance Committee. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Crumby. I might say you had me at fun and finance. You put those two words together and you had me. For those who are here, I know I see Ms. Stewart. Is there anyone else here from your committee tonight?
Not tonight.
Okay, well, we just want to give y'all a round of applause. Thank you very much. And that's just for your hard work and your dedication of taking time out to do a very important service to the district. We really appreciate y'all taking this seriously. We really appreciate putting together thoughtful recommendations and for everything that you've done. And you did a great job speaking tonight, Mr. Cumby.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Wilbanks.
Thank you, President Mays. Mr. Crumby, thank you. Thank you for stepping up. I know it's a big job, but and you've done well, but I know your predecessor probably set the bar pretty low. No, thank you, sincerely, thank you for stepping up. This is important. I am grateful that we as a board involve the citizens of the community and all the stakeholders and give them a say into one of the most important aspects of our district, and that is long-term financial health. So it's a tough job, and I appreciate the work you guys did. So I have a few questions, just a few, and I'll try to go through quickly. I know we have a few other lights on the mic. On page 2, you know, one of your very first meetings, you looked at the elementary investments. And I agree with you on your recommendation on full-day pre-K. The Texas legislature spoke loudly. Everyone knows the benefits, and it's been proven out in our districts to the east and to the west. And we now have the opportunity to take over that. We also have shown a turnaround in our decline in enrollment because we now offer plenty of programs of choice. My question to you is, when you guys met that night and talked, did you guys look at any other opportunities outside of pre-K of where there might be a gap in things that we could be offering at the elementary level?
So,
Or in terms of investments, and not just programs, but overall investments in the overall elementary experience?
So at that particular meeting, we had a brief update on some previous elementary investments, but the majority of that meeting was looking forward at pre-kindergarten investments and the benefits of pre-kindergarten. So to your question, no, we weren't looking forward at potential investments in elementary that was specifically for pre-kindergarten.
Okay. So my next question is on the slide on the letter to the School Finance Commission. So I know Ms. Moore was involved in putting that letter together, as well as yourself, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention all the hard work that Ms. DeKine put on that letter. And I know we kind of sent it off, and we don't know if it made any effect or not, but I would argue that it did. It added to that large chorus from thousands of people across the states, from educators who sent a loud message to our legislature this year. And miracles of miracles, they actually came together and actually passed something. And I think it has to do with not just the work that we did, but everyone collectively. And so I was glad to see the committee and the district allow the actual citizens and stakeholders of the committee be a part of that process, because I think overall it helped. So again, thanks to everyone who worked hard. I know you guys had a short window to produce that letter, but and especially to Ms. DeKine, who did a lot of the heavy lifting. So thanks for that.
I absolutely agree. And to that point, You know, one of the concerns with school finance legislation is it's not a permanent set of legislation. And one of the things that, you know, our committee has spoken about is the need for continued pressure.
Good.
Right.
It's great to hear.
So, you know, whether it's committees, citizens, community, board, district, whomever, I think there is a need for continued pressure to make sure that this doesn't turn into a 2-year bill or, you know, a short-term fix, as we mentioned. There is a need to make sure that this does get renewed and that this does turn into continued revenue help.
I think my colleagues and I concur with that. So thank you. So the enrollment trends, when you guys looked at that, so so you think we've turned the corner? You had a nice little chart that indicated that. So I like the fact that we're investing in marketing and that we're acting or acknowledging the fact that we're serving customers and we're marketing to those customers now in a proactive way. Would you say that's provided the biggest impact? Did you guys analyze that, or were there any additional areas you thought we could improve on in terms of stemming that remaining declining enrollment?
Yeah, you know, we heard quite a bit of information. There are a few things that are controllable versus uncontrollable. You know, so there are things like population that are non-controllable, right? So we heard information last year about just the natural population dip that happened that impacted elementary during the recession. That's expected to grow. Hopefully that helps us. That's something that we cannot control, but hopefully that helps us. The things that we can control and that I think that our district is doing a really good job of, that I think are impacting us immediately, and I think there is correlation with, are things like the customer service that we're offering, right? Calling people whenever they're not getting into the school that they're trying to get into, offering them the ability to get into a different school that they didn't select, right? Those are things that that we didn't do before that we're doing now, and that have positive outcomes for us and for our students. And those are things that we should be doing. On top of that, we now have programs that attract them, right? Previously, whenever we had 1 or 2 offerings that they wanted, and if they didn't get those, then they didn't want to be in our district. Now we're investing in multiple programs that actually retain them. So these are things that I think, as long as we continue investing and we make those touch points, then we should see those numbers continue to go up, right? The marketing is there. If we have programs that we're proud of, we should be marketing them. If we have underutilized capacity, we should be filling those schools with students that want to be there, whether they know about it or not. We should be making those touch points. And I think our district is doing a better job of that now than we did in the past.
Thanks for that. I know my other colleagues are wanting to get in, but I apologize. I have just one more question. I think this one's going to be geared towards Ms. Powell. So on the page on topic 2, where you talked about currently we serve roughly 3,500 pre-K students in our current setup with half-day. I know we're planning on next year of adding 5 full-day pre-K. Once we add those, what will be our capacity in terms of total pre-K offerings?
Okay,
in terms of number of students served?
What we're targeting, even through capital planning, which is a longer-term thing, is 4,100 total, is increasing up to that point. With an additional 5 units next year, or this first year, we'll be serving kids who are already here with us. I think we will gain some kids. I don't know exactly how many at this point. We have the capacity by adding teachers to probably serve another 100 plus,
Okay.
in addition to the kids who were already expected to be served in those 5 campuses in pre-K this year.
All right, thank you, Ms. Powell. I'll turn it over to the mic. I think I've hogged it long enough.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Mr. Hogg.
Thank you, President Mays. Mr. Crumby, thank you. I know especially you have a new baby at home, so don't fall asleep while you're standing up there. But thank you for your work. I know you stepped up and took a lot of time away from your family. I think the entire committee. Mr. Crumby, and also Ms. Powell, I love these recommendations. I think they're good, reasonable recommendations for where we move forward. And you see over the last years, you guys have studied operational efficiency. I'd love to see more recommendations on total compensation of where we go in the future, especially on the healthcare side. As y'all know, that's a big issue, and I think that total rewards is a big piece I think we always talk about. One thing y'all have looked at, as y'all talk about a TRE on an as-needed basis in the future, you talk about operational efficiencies. I think this committee almost evolves a little bit next year into potentially one of the efficiency studies that the legislature is requiring us to do. I think it was through HB3 that's one of the requirements that's done. Ms. Powell, I know no one really knows who officially does those and exactly what the requirements are, but that could be a nice piece possibly for this committee in the next year to kind of serve as our community liaisons, a major piece. It really helps. This committee's already got such operational knowledge somewhat from a community standpoint of our district, along with our entire staff. I think it helps blend those two together. So that's the one thought and recommendation I'd make, because we know, and I don't know how long those studies are good for once you do them, but we know that study will have to be completed by the district per legislative rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Ms. Walton?
Thank you, President Mays. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I was ready to talk about that too. I know, you're reading my mind. Especially in regard to the enrollment trends and getting that up, for lack of a more astute word. Do you think possibly the committee could consider looking at investing in compensation that attracts strong teachers and the best and the brightest of campus leaders? That would possibly help rebuild some enrollment that we've lost in some buildings where there might have been less than that. Other ideas, positive school climate, stronger discipline, might be something else that y'all might want to consider. I totally agree with the committee's 3 recommendations. I think they're spot on. Y'all have done a lot of hard work on this and come up with some good ones, but did the committee discuss in any way, have a discussion regarding employee compensation and benefits?
So we did not discuss compensation and benefits. We did affirm at a high level the idea, the recommendation from last year that we needed to stay competitive. Right, I think our take on compensation was that we wanted to that we wanted to make sure that we were competitive, and that was as deep as we wanted to get this year, since we took a look at it last year. There were a couple of other, and I'll let Ms. Powell jump in if she wants to. There were also a couple of mandates that were a little bit different from each one of the bills, right, House bill and Senate bill, that were slightly different, and I'm not sure that there was a recommendation that could have come until there was resolution on the 2 of those. Is there something that you'd like to add?
quite a bit taller than me. No, so Ms. Walton, he's correct. You know, we try to cycle around the topics that the committee studies, and so a year ago, we did a more in-depth study on compensation. We will do that again, certainly as we've gotten closer to knowing what the school finance legislation was going to be. We began to understand that there likely was a compensation component of that. But I think that is a healthy thing for this committee to look at periodically. But as Mr. Crumby said, that was something that simply because we had done it so recently, we didn't bring it back for another discussion this year.
But I hear you saying, though, that in the 1920 FFC charge or whatever,
Right,
that this will become a priority?
we can cycle that back through, yes.
Well, I mean, you and I know the size of the budget that compensation is large, and that the long-term financial health of this district, you know, 100% of it, and compensation being a large part of it, would be really important for, I think, all of the, you know, all of the wonderful people and their experience and their backgrounds could really bring to bear on the question. Yeah, the state has given us something for 2 years, but what happens after that 2 years? What's the long-range vision of our district for how we are going to do compensation and benefits, as Mr. Hogg indicated? So I would be very glad to see that happen.
So, and if I could address one other topic that you all just spoke about, the efficiency audits, that is something that is mandated by House Bill 3 in anticipation of holding a tax ratification election. And so there are some requirements about you have to have it done within, I think it has to be finished at least, I believe it's like 3 months ahead of an election. You had to post it online, what have you. At one point, there was some discussion that you could only use a firm that had been selected by the state in kind of a pre-approved list. They changed that, though, in the end, and you can actually use public accounting firms. You can use your own audit firm even to conduct those. And so that's something that we will need to look at probably in the next year or so. We'll want to make sure that if we know that we've got, or if we think we have the possibility of a TRE coming, that we time that efficiency audit to work in conjunction with the timing of calling an election for that at some point down the road.
Well, and where we are on compensation will be a very critical part of that TRE also.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Crumby.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Mr. Crumby, thank you again for your presentation. We really appreciate it, and congratulations on your new addition to your family.
Thank you very much.
My apologies. Dr. Reich.
So quickly overlooked. No, thank you, President Mays. Mr. Crumby, thank you very much for the presentation. To you, for your leadership, to you and the committee. The volume of information, the repeated data dumps, and to get anywhere near cognizant of all the minutia and the details that go into long-range strategic planning with the fiscal health of our district in mind is quite overwhelming. And I appreciate you and everybody on the committee, all of your efforts, taking those extremely deep dives to learn those nuances, that combined with the fluidity of a very active legislative session certainly made, I'm sure, committee meetings not very easy to set agendas and moving forward. So I do really appreciate the time and investment and what will surely be your continued investment. I think that my colleagues had made some great points. I would expound on the compensation tied to our current legislation with HB 3. what we have seen is such a large variability of how districts are being impacted by that financially. And as a result, how districts are reacting to that impact and what they're doing related to compensation as an example. It may be valuable to try to, as a committee, look at, in taking compensation into account, looking at those trends, if there are any to be defined, on how districts maybe in certain categories are reacting. If there's a way to trend that out, I think that would be very helpful moving forward, especially for this body, because there is such a large variability. And as you know, we were also very active relative to advocating for better health coverage and health care rates for our staff here at Arlington ISD, and that's probably something that would come across your agenda, I would think, in the future as well, as maybe we will move the needle. We don't know yet. We're still pushing. But how that ties into total compensation, as Mr. Hogg has mentioned previously, that is very important to look at the total compensation for our staff, for our teachers, et cetera. So those long range, I think, would be very helpful, useful for us as a board moving forward. And I'm sure there's going to be some other things that bubble up as well. So again, thank you very, very much. I appreciate the conciseness of the thoughts and the recommendations presented here this evening, and look forward to more into the future.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Okay, I see no more lights. So now we will move on in our agenda to our open public hearing on the 2019-2020 budget and proposed tax rates. We have comment cards from the audience, so when I call your name, please step to the podium. You will have 5 minutes to speak. Trustees will not reply to the speakers. My first card is Mr. Richard Weber addressing the tax rate.
Am I supposed to give my address? It's Brother, no, okay. Hello, y'all. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I want to talk about the tax rate, the proposed tax rate. The number one thing you need to remember is that TAD has been very, very mean to me and a great many of your taxpayers. So, yes, the proposed tax rate went down by 7 cents. That was mandated by the state. But the debt service portion, you had Ms. Powell up here 2 weeks ago saying that the evaluations went up by 11.4%. Well, I don't think they're going to go down that much. Again, TAD has been very, very mean to your taxpayers. The way I hear from people that have challenged their taxes, it isn't going very well. So the way I see it, even at 11%, the debt service portion of the tax rate could still go down another 3.5 cents per dollar. And I'm greatly concerned about the tax bill. The tax evaluation increases have been outrageous. And I hope the tax rate goes down that other 3.5 cents per $100. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Next, we have Mr. Larry McFarland discussing the budget.
I'd like to take just a moment to speak with you guys about the budget, or primarily to speak in opposition of the massive fleecing of taxpayers called the AISD budget. Having a guaranteed budget increase forever on the backs of taxpayers, plus having a huge amount of money being paid from the state, what is it, $10,000, $15,000 a year for each classroom. That's not a real world scenario. All it does is encourage waste and abuse. Massively overpaying administrators to administer spending somebody else's money, it's a travesty. The only solution to this budget fiasco is to pay the AISD administrators, all of them, the same rate as what you pay classroom teachers. Because those are the guys that make AISD work. It's not the administrators, it's not the superintendents, it's the teachers. You should pay them like you mean it. And if you pay them a lot, you're going to get the best. Administrators can screw stuff up real fast, but teachers make AISD work. If we make those changes and pay the administrators just like the teachers, that'll guarantee the administrators are there for the students. And not just to get a really, really, really big paycheck or a book deal paid for by AISD. You've probably seen that, right? What you need to do is take the total number and either divide by 2, multiply by half, should get the same number. That's what your tax rate, your budget should look like for AISD for next year. Pretty simple. In closing, let me speak for the vast majority of Arlington taxpayers, the silent majority who have paid their fair share to AISD every year, what, $5,000 a year or so for the last decade, even when we don't have kids in AISD. It's time to fix that. Therefore, I urge you to vote no on this budget proposal.
Mr. McFarland, is there anyone else who would like to address the board regarding the 2019-2020 budget or proposed tax rate? Okay, the public hearing on 2019-2020 budget and proposed tax rate is now closed. Now we come to our open forum for agenda items. This is a routine part of the school board's agenda for regularly scheduled meetings. This segment of the meeting provides citizens with an opportunity to share their views with the trustees on items that are on the agenda tonight. It is not intended to be a discussion or a debate, and trustees will not reply to the speakers. Derogatory comments aimed at an individual will not be tolerated. Personnel matters are not appropriate subjects for open forum. I have one card from our audience. When your name is called, please step to the podium. You will have 5 minutes to speak. A lighted timer on the podium will assist you in pacing your presentation. A yellow light will illuminate when there is 1 minute left for you to complete your presentation. When the red light comes on and the buzzer sounds, please end your presentation. Mr. Jeffrey Harris to discuss the budget.
This is very tall. I'll be all right. President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos. I'm Jeffrey Harris, Regional Manager for UEA. First, UEA wants to thank you and the superintendent for implementing a teacher salary schedule that will provide transparency in how teachers are paid. This has been a priority of our members, and we greatly appreciate your efforts. Secondly, to stay competitive, with surrounding districts, imperative that Arlington give an additional compensation on top of what HB3 requires. Last week, our executive director spoke to you about what surrounding districts are doing in regards to compensation. And unfortunately, we're battling the perception our lieutenant governor gave that every teacher will receive a $5,000 pay increase. We ask that you do as much as possible for all of our employees of the district. They have worked hard this year and deserve a meaningful increase in salary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. We have no more cards. We will now move to our discussion action item. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. And at this time, I would like to bring for further discussion the budget. And so I'll ask Ms. Powell to come to the podium. As you know, we've been discussing the budget over several meetings and had more clarity from the state in terms of our funding. You heard from FFC, so these pieces are now coming together, and we have our presentation here regarding the proposed budget. So Ms. Powell.
Thank you. President Mays, board members, Dr. Cavazos. As Dr. Cavazos has just mentioned, we are bringing this yet again. This will be now the third evening that we've talked about budget. And to remind everyone where we are, June 4th was the first time we spoke about the budget. We talked about the preliminary budget, and the board voted on the proposed rate that we put in the notice for the hearing that was held a few minutes ago. Last week, we continued that discussion, and so tonight, we are going to continue the discussion. We've had the public hearing. The board will take what may be a final look at the budget, talk about compensation in particular. The board may adopt the budget this evening. We have to adopt the budget by June 30th by law because our fiscal year starts July 1. We will not adopt the tax rate, though, until August after we get the certified values from Tarrant Appraisal District. So just to recap what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, in regards to the general fund, we've looked at revenues and expenditures. And those revenues, as highlights, include funding based on property values that have grown an estimated 11.4%. We won't know for sure until we have received the certified values July 25th, but currently, based on the data we've been given from Tarrant Appraisal District, it appears that our property values will be up approximately 11.4%. The M&O rate, as we've already heard, has been proposed at 97 cents, which is 7 cents lower than this past year's rate, and that is a reduction that was required by House Bill 3. It was passed by the legislature. House Bill 3 also provides additional state funding to replace the dollars that we lose by lowering our tax rate, so the state is increasing its investment in public education. The enrollment estimate is down a bit from this current year, and as you heard Mr. Crumby speak about, that is a lesser drop than we've experienced in the last several years, and we do think that we're seeing the effects of some of the changes in new programming that we've implemented. And then finally, House Bill 3 will result in $14 million more revenue in 1920 than we would have had if the current law had remained in effect. On the expenditure side, our budgeted expenditures align with our strategic plan and support the objectives within the strategic plan. We have a net staffing change now of 30.5 positions. That includes the 10 positions, 10 teachers and 10 TAs, total of 20 positions that we spoke about at the last meeting that would be for implementing full-day pre-K at 5 of our elementary schools this upcoming year. As we know, House Bill 3 mandates that districts offer a full-day pre-K program. And in this first year, there are opportunities to get a waiver from that as districts ramp up to provide that service, both in terms of facilities and staffing and other programming planning that needs to take place. We do want to go forward, though, with 5 sites offering full-day pre-K so that we can begin to transition and develop our programming for full implementation the following year. So those 20 positions have been added into the budget. We spoke about them at our last meeting. They are part of the base budget that is being presented to you this evening. And so they result in now a net reduction of 30.5 teachers through the staffing process this year. The budget includes funding for opening the Arlington College and Career High School. That is a second early college high school program here in Arlington, and 3 new elementary academy programs, and then of course the full-day program, full-day kinder pre-K that we just spoke about for 5 campuses. In terms of compensation, there's nothing in this proposed budget that you're going to see on the next slide for salary increases or compensation increases. That is a topic still to be discussed and determined by the board. We do have a mandate, though, from House Bill 3 to provide, use a certain portion of the gain in our funding to provide salary increases, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. So the proposed budget, as it exists today, results in an operating surplus of $3.8 million, and again, that is before any adjustments for compensation. So as the proposed budget exists, we would end the budget year, this next year, with a fund balance that is equal to a little over 4 1/3 months of operating expenditure. So again, still very healthy fund balance. In the area of compensation, House Bill 3 does mandate that we spend 30% of our gain in funding for compensation increases for employees other than administrators. And of that 30%, then we're required to spend 75% on teachers, counselors, librarians, and nurses. The law then goes one step further and says that we are required to prioritize differentiated compensation for teachers that have more than 5 years of experience. So it's very, very explicit about how you divide that up. So for Arlington, in terms of calculating the gain for the raise mandate, the gain is $23.7 million. And then 30% of that is about $7.1 million. You heard me mention just a minute ago that we would be earning $14 million more funding this year under House Bill 3 than we would have earned if current law had remained in effect. That's a different calculation than this. For the mandate, we're required to look at our gain in funding over the 18-19 year. So results in a $23.7 million total gain, of which 30% has to be spent on compensation. So that's about $7.1 million. And that 30% has to be for everyone except administrators. We've talked in last week's meeting again about health insurance. Currently, the district contributes $3,300 a year for professional employees and $3,480 per year for all other employees towards health insurance. The TRS Board of Directors has approved the 2019-20 premiums and plan benefits. And those result in premium increases of 3% for the high deductible plan, the Active Care Select plan, the Active Care 2 plan, which is closed now to new participation, will have an increase of about 9%, and then the HMO plan actually has a premium decrease of 3.5%. So, we've modeled here, based on discussions we've had last week, the cost of several different combinations of raises. Keeping in mind, we have to prioritize raises for teachers that have more than 5 years experience. So that's why you see the split percentages here. There are 5 different possible combinations here. Certainly we can look at any others, but 3 of these have additional contributions factored in for health insurance, and 2 do not. You can see the totals across the bottom. for the total cost of these different options ranging anywhere from $8.8 million to more than $10 million. And each one of these does satisfy the mandate for expending 30% of the gain on everyone except administrators. So this summary slide shows the budget incorporating into it those different raise combinations and health insurance combinations that we just looked at on the previous slide. And the numbers here correspond to the numbers on the preceding page. So ranging anywhere from a raise that would give 2.5% additional compensation to teachers with more than 6 years of experience, and 2.25% for all other employees with no health insurance, up to scenario 5 here would give teachers who have 6 or more years experience a 3% raise, and all others 2.5% with $132 towards health insurance. You can see the difference that makes to our bottom line. In each case, each one of these, we would end up adopting a budget with a deficit ranging anywhere from about $4.9 million under scenario 1 up to $6.9 million deficit under scenario 5. I will point out that scenario 4 is the one that Ms. Walton asked about at the last meeting. Also at the last meeting, Mr. Hogg mentioned that he had a desire to see raise total compensation increases totaling somewhere between $10 and $11 million. And so both scenario 4 and scenario 5 do that. Moving on then to the other funds, food service fund. Again, we looked at all these funds last week. The primary source for food service fund is the National Child Nutrition Program that provides reimbursements for the lunch and breakfast programs. This fund does not get any funding, any support from the general fund at all. We have factored in a 10-cent increase for the full price paid meals for lunches to comply with the federal requirements, and a 10-cent increase in paid breakfast meals due to the increase in food and labor costs. Our percent of students on free or reduced lunch is about 74%, and so most of our kids are eating on free or reduced eligibility at the moment. In terms of expenditures, we base the expenditures, the programming around our estimated participation and the estimated federal reimbursement rates. Typically, the food service fund employees get the same salary increase that all other districts or all other district employees get. There's nothing built in here yet for salary increases, but that's been our norm. So currently, the proposed budget for food service has a surplus of $420,982. And again, that's before any changes in compensation. We've modeled here the cost of those same 5 scenarios that we looked at for the general fund. And you can see the cost of those across the board here. I'll point out, I did have the question, are there any teachers in this fund? Because the headers say teachers. We don't have any teachers in this fund. We simply left the header there because it's the same as the model that we generated for the general operating fund. So with those 5 different combinations of compensation increases factored into the budget, you can see the impact on the food service fund here. In all cases, the food service fund would have a small surplus, and that amount varies depending on which combination of raise and or health insurance the board might choose. In the other funds, we will also be adopting a budget for the natural gas fund, the debt service fund, and the construction fund. There have been no changes in these since the presentation we made last week. The natural gas fund accounts for royalties and interest earnings on royalties from natural gas leases that the district has. The debt service fund accounts for the taxes that we levy to pay the bonded debt that is due in this upcoming fiscal year, or in this upcoming tax year, and also for callable debt of about $25 million that we expect to call this year. Then the construction fund appears, it indicates that there's a large deficit there. That's simply because we've already sold all of the bonds that have been authorized through the 2014 bond package. And so those funds are part of that beginning fund balance. And we are completing the last of our projects out of those proceeds. And so that's why it appears that there is a deficit there. In terms of the tax rate, as it's already been mentioned, the tax rate that we proposed to the board just to adopt so that we could present it in the notice for the hearing that was held tonight has the 7-cent reduction in it on the M&O rate that's required by House Bill 3, and no change in the debt service rate. So a total reduction of 7 cents. And so with that, we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. This is a discussion action item. Do I have any questions or discussions from any of my colleagues? Ms. Walton.
Thank you, President Mays. I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to be certain. Ms. Powell, when we get the state allotment for our operating from the state in 2019-20, will that allotment be reduced by the 11.4% property tax rate?
Well, those values are taken into consideration, and so yes, they are. The state funding system is supposed to be a shared arrangement between state and local districts. And so those property values are factored into the formulas that are used to compute our total state funding. And so, we always talk about the higher our property values are, the less state aid we get. So our property values are up quite a bit this year. Under the terms of House Bill 3, they've actually changed the calculation. And so we'll be using current year values in the calculation of state aid. In years before this, we always used prior year values in that calculation. So in this year that we've made this jump now to current year values, when you couple that with a large increase in our local values, it has a much more dramatic impact on our state funding. And so back to your question, yes, our state aid is being reduced by those higher property values.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Mr. Hogg.
Thank you, Ms. Mays. Thank you, Ms. Powell, and thank you, my colleagues. And I know we always talk about June's budget month, but we talk budget year round. This is nothing new, and we know this is something that we make amendments, we make tweaks, we make changes throughout this budget throughout the entire year. This is just the time where we have to officially approve coming up and make these kind of decisions. One of the things with HB3 is we're all still calculating through some of those. I commend this board and staff for being somewhat cautious. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows where we're going to be 4 years from now on funding with it? So I think we have to be cautious over that. I don't know if some of our surrounding districts are doing that. Ms. Powell and our superintendent, I do ask the question. We never really got in some of the things provided in HB3, and I know it's still freshly new, so some of the things we don't know. We never got into incentive pay. Something that HB3 is providing extra incentive for compensation as long as we put together some kind of structure. There's pay coming from the state for that incentive pay. Are we analyzing that? Is that a budget amendment? Are we reviewing? What's the outcome?
So I can speak to that. So there is virtually no information yet about that. That has to go through a rulemaking process with TEA for starters. And that amount and all of the incentive funding for performance outcomes.
Right.
And the teacher effectiveness allotment had been reduced from what I think the Finance Commission originally recommended and from where the House version of House Bill 3 started. So there's no information available yet in our meetings with the Texas School Alliance and Mocasian Associates that are the foremost legislative consultants in the state around school finance. They're not doing anything with that at the moment because none of that information is available. So, and then in terms of how you would even qualify for it, that involves that rulemaking process that hasn't started yet.
Nothing like the legislature passing something and not really having the rules or saying implement pre-K and we're going to give you 60 days to be able to do that, but you can apply for a waiver. Some of them are they run businesses and former board members, so I don't understand how they think that through sometimes. That's okay. Let me also ask, and I think this relates to the same thing. Dr. Cavazos, Ms. Powell, one of the others, they option, I think there's some schools of ours that would benefit from this and like this. Not all. They offer an extended year pay where you can extend the school year to 210 days, which some of our schools I could see. I can think of some principals in schools that, some teachers that would really like that, see that. Is that something we evaluate for this next year and implement there? What's the plan on that?
So both of those, including the extended year, but both of those are going to be like a grant, and so there's going to be funding for it.
Right.
And the more school districts that apply, the less the money, obviously, per school district, but the fewer that apply, the more the money. Yes, in terms of extending the year or the day, that is something that we will be examining as well for certain schools in certain situations and for certain students in certain situations where the support is actually something that would benefit their family and the school and benefit the student's achievement. Same with the incentive pay as well. When the rules are finally made, et cetera, there may be situations to help and assist in compensation and things like that for effective teachers as well, that we will certainly be examining. But to the extended day, time is one of those variables that is a strong variable in terms of achievement for students and some students in terms of more time. But just like you said, until the rules are made and what the actual strings are, if you will, it's with that cautious kind of a look that we're starting our review on that. But we're certainly open to those two big pieces.
So with the, and I'll add just a little bit on the extended school year piece, that's for specifically grades pre-K through 5, and it's half-day funding. So yeah, that is, and we actually had a bit of conversation about that earlier today.
I think some of our elementaries that would jump on that and some teachers that would jump on that. Not all teachers. There's a lot that are like, no way, I don't want to do the extended year. And I fully get that from their perspective also. It's I encourage as we get that, I think that's an early in the fall conversation for us to start exploring that discussion for the next year on those. Ms. Powell, we're required on some mandates to make some increases, 75%, 25% of 30% total. Some of these budget recommendations we've made, are we definitely meeting and exceeding those mandates?
Every one of those scenarios that we showed earlier, we do exceed the mandate.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've talked about, and y'all have heard me harp about, because you got to take total compensation into play, and insurance counts as that. Insurance does count as part of that in that mandate of that increase, correct?
It does.
Thank you. Just checking on that. We've also done some leveling. Does that increase and count towards our compensation?
Leveling in.
Some leveling of pay scales and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, I think we've got the right pieces. I think this district's smart to not, I think some districts are adding it all this year, but we've also got to remember we've got to add it next year also for whatever increase. So it's nice to make sure you're, what's the right word? Cautious and not going all out when you get a little bump. I've never seen a bump from this. We've been fighting on the negative for my 11 years up here. as a board with the legislature. This is the first time we haven't had to cut 5% of our budget, which is shocking. So I commend this board for not going too far, too fast, because we know right when we go there, it turns back around. I think also we have to think we've got these next year coming up cost, adding pre-K, also increasing that. So I think spreading that cost out of making sure we do meet those mandates for the next 2 years and exceed those mandates over the next 2 years. And also as we explore more with insurance of what we do, whether we actually have a partnership with TRS and are able to split out, if we create our own private plan, whatever options we have, because that is part of our total compensation package to our employees. And unfortunately, we have high turnover on many of our non-teacher positions because most teachers are locked in. They don't have really another option in the DFW area for insurance. But for some of our other positions, such as security guards, maintenance, they do have other options. And some of them do leave because of insurance from where those come in. So I think the board's making the right decision on those numbers. As we look, I'm comfortable with the 3% number, and then the insurance increase is where I would be leaning towards to have a common and sensible increase that rewards our teachers and all of our staff for the hard work they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Dr. Reich?
Thank you, President Mays. I appreciate what Mr. Hogg stated, and I absolutely concur. And I do appreciate Ms. Walton's getting clarification on the infamous state aid. And HB3 has addressed that to some degree. It has repaired that, but the reality is when we get those blue pieces of paper and those values are way up, we know that that means we're getting less state aid. And that's a very hard pill to swallow for me as a taxpayer, for anybody I know. And has been mentioned, here we are for this biennium, we don't know what it's going to be, because by cutting our revenue, they're cutting their revenue. And so where does the revenue come from? That's the question that I have asked since this session, before the session officially began, and the answer is still evading. So I do agree. We have to be cautious, yet at the same token, do everything that we can for our employees. Ms. Powell, there's one question on the tax rate for the debt service. If we were to look at decreasing that, in the long run, wouldn't that essentially cost taxpayers more, cost us more in interest over the term?
If we decrease it?
Mm-hmm. So then we're going to take longer to pay it off, right?
We are. Maybe I'm not sure I'm following the question. So if we decrease the tax rate, does that decrease or increase our interest?
Yes.
So we can refund debt early, mm-hmm. and that will save us. I'm sorry, I think I'm with you now. When we refund debt, that helps us avoid future interest payments.
Right.
We only do that at points that it makes sense to do that. First of all, you have to have debt that's callable even. We can do refundings, but we only do them when we know that that the savings is significant enough to warrant the expense of going through a new bond issue for that. In this case, we have $25 million worth of debt that's callable this upcoming year that will by retiring that debt early, save us interest down the road. So mm-hmm. I'm sorry, it's kind of another.
You only have a few
thought
things.
Process.
You only have a few things to keep somehow keep your head straight around all of this, and to that I do want to commend you, all your staff, that you guys have done an incredible job. This HB3 is an example. In the middle of our budget process, that's 300 plus pages of bill that has been receiving updates and adjustments and modifications on the runs just about daily, right? So to keep up with all of that and still come out with some solid recommendations with our input is really kind of remarkable. So I really do appreciate that. We know it's going to continue to adjust, but I do believe that, as you have said, the lion's share of those adjustments are pretty solid right now, pretty locked in. So it's going to be some tweaks. Some of the numbers that you've brought up, the 14 million in new monies. If we look at with what Mr. Hogg had stated, looking at the basically this option 5 scenario at 3% and the 132 on the health insurance, that 10,781,000, that's 73% of that $14 million new monies. That's pretty great investment that we should really think about and be thankful for. If you look at that Chapter 48 gain and the moving around to that 23, 660, 444, that's 46% of that, which is still significant. And that's something that I think this board should be very proud of. As mentioned earlier, there's a lot of districts doing different things, and that depends on what they're getting, what they're looking at, and potential deficits, and how much they're trying to maybe match what the false narrative has been put out there by our state leadership of 10,000 a teacher, 5,000 a teacher. Oh, it's going to be 4,200 a teacher, as an example, and we all know that that is not the case across the board. We also know that it is something that we don't know what the future holds. They still haven't worked that out, and so for us to do what we can to acknowledge our staff, award their efforts, which as mentioned earlier, our teachers are on the front lines of our future. And you take that combined with the fact that we have had substantial advocacy this past legislative session for healthcare and adjusting that, as I mentioned earlier, and hopefully there's going to be some headway there. I think that we have a great opportunity here with the health insurance. If we look at that $132 annual, that does completely cover the increase of 2 out of the 4 plans, which is the majority of individuals. I'm not looking for the numbers of the percentages. In another category, it applies at least a third of that increase to cover that. So I think that's really wise for this board to be able to say, we are still advocating for you. We want to try to help. I know for years I have had teachers tell me I am netting less now than I was 5 years ago because of this health insurance. I'm tired of hearing that, and here's an opportunity to be able to do something about that. So for all of those, combined with, again, 73% of that $14 million on these salaries, I am prepared to make a motion. I see there's other lights, so I'll defer. Go ahead. All right. Well, then I would absolutely move then that we adopt a budget that includes the 3% salary increase for teachers at 6 years and above, 2.5% for all others, and also the $132 on that health insurance.
Okay, do I have a second? Ms. Walton?
I would gladly second that motion, Dr. Reich. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I want to just point out one thing. The board is required to adopt the budget by functional category. And so we have presented a functional budget to you all. And so that would be our understanding, is that that's the budget being adopted plus the adjustment into it for the raise.
Yes, absolutely. And just before is that, you were just going to second, or did you have a question? Oh, okay. I was just going to say that I also think that with this scenario for our food service fund, which is a separate situation, that you still remain in the black is very important as well, plus being able to realize that benefit. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Powell, I believe based on what you said, we might need to restate our motion to be based on the functions. Is that correct?
I think as long as it's clear that, that we are, that the board is voting on the budget as presented at the functional level, and you do have that in your packet, and then we would add to that the raise that was specified and the health insurance.
Okay. Mr. Wilbanks?
I'd like to amend the motion with a friendly amendment that we approve the functional area budgets with the addition of the amendment for the raises for option 5 with a 3% increase for 6+ years teachers, all others at 2.5 with 132 health insurance.
Yeah, so you're just restating.
He didn't ever state, so I was just
Yeah.
making it clear.
Yeah, so we won't say you're amending it, you're rewording it. Because we didn't change what,
I withdraw the amendment. If it's clear what he said was clear, then there's no need to amend it.
okay. So Dr. Reich, would you like to restate, or are you good?
Thank you. I was waiting for the light. Yeah, so to specifically approve the budget by functional category as presented. And everything else I already stated.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. So we had a motion made by Dr. Reich, a second by Ms. Walton. Are there any questions? And is everybody very clear? Okay, everybody's clear. Okay, then you may vote. I didn't see a light, didn't come up. I apologize. Was it your light, Mr. Chapa? Okay, I got this. Okay, let's vote. Okay, all present, vote in the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda are items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Do we have any items to be withdrawn? Okay. So tonight, we will be considering the items listed on your agenda under the consent items. Mrs. Powell?
President Mays, board members, Dr. Cavazos, we have for your consideration this evening donations that total $80,562, which brings our year-to-date total, and this is our final report for the year, to $1,442,256. And we have 9 bids on the agenda this evening for your consideration. In all cases, the administration is recommending the lowest bid, the bid that represents the best value to the district.
Okay, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mr. Hogg?
Move for approval consent agenda as presented.
Have a second, Ms. Fowler? Okay, so we have a motion from Mr. Hogg and a second by Ms. Fowler to accept the consent agenda. I bet y'all couldn't even say that if it was spelled that way. The consent agenda. So is there any discussion?
Never heard that one.
Okay, seeing none, vote.
That's awesome. Oh, yeah, I put you.
Okay, all present have voted in the affirmative. Thank you, Ms. Powell. Okay, Ms. Lisa, do we have any cards for our open forum for non-agenda items? Okay. No cards, so we will move to our superintendent's report. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays, and I'd like to thank and all staff that's involved with this. But if you've been to the PDC lately, you've probably noticed two things. It's very busy and it's transformed into Camp Impact 2019. Our yearly Summer Institute for Professional Learning has been focusing on literacy and leadership this summer. There are over 259 sessions being offered throughout the summer, mostly facilitated by AISD staff at various departments, advanced academic, PBIS, several cadre members, instructional coaches, and classroom teachers, as well as some outside facilitators as well. All in-district facilitators participated in best practices in professional learning. I would like to thank the participants, the teachers that are coming to this training for their dedication and the support that they get from the PDC and our staff development. And also, our newest campuses to launch the active learning cycle spent time these last 2 weeks in the Career Tech Center, training and preparing for the implementation in the 1920 school year. We have 11 new campuses for next year, and some of the staff members have been presenting, the ones that are already implementing the active learning cycle, to the new cohort. Thank you to, again, the dedication of our teachers as they come to this summer training, all the presenters, and the time that it takes to put this massive effort on for teacher training and development. That is much appreciated. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Do we have any reports from other trustees? Dr. Reich.
In the spirit of training, I just want to say thank you to all my colleagues for all the training that we just went through over the past several days. Appreciate everybody's time and dedication, and I believe that each of us walked away with some pearls that we will help to have a discussion on and maybe explore for our district as well. So I just thank you all for your commitment. Happy to be part of this team.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Mr. Wilbanks.
I just want to echo what my colleague, Dr. Reich, stated. And as a new trustee, I appreciate the opportunity to go and get my training as a newbie. Obviously, I have some more training to do on Robert's Rules of Order and window them in, but I'm sure my colleagues will help me get the hang of it in a few months. The one thing that I took away from the TASB SLI conference was that there are a lot of school boards in the state of Texas, over 1,000, and there's a lot of school boards with problems. And I was fortunate enough to attend an Excellence in Governance panel discussion and came away with an appreciation for all the great things and what a high-functioning board we are, and what a high-function, and that I have the privilege of serving on a board that have gone through a lot of that and put a lot of those best practices in place, so we don't have a divisive, dysfunctional board. We actually come together and actually get things done. And I don't know that the broader community appreciates just how well you guys have functioned for so long, and I am grateful to be on the board with colleagues who think the same way. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. And with that being said, getting things done for the students and our staff here in Arlington ISD, I believe, is definitely a passion for everyone who is sitting up here on this dais. So with that being said, thank you, staff and administration, for staying here with us this evening. It is 9:18, and we are adjourned.